So in today's video, we're here to talk about a game that I've been playing steadily off and on for about 2 months now. And I want to talk about it because I feel like it flew a little under the radar. As of right now, this game is a time exclusive for the PlayStation 5. It is also available on PC. I do believe within a year, the exclusivity is going to end and it'll end up on Xbox. We're here to talk about a game that has a uniqueness and freshness that's just different from everything else that's out right now. And it's none other than... Oh God. Oh, who put that there? We don't play those kind of games here. Come on, man. This ain't that kind of channel. We don't do that here. We have quality here. We make quality YouTube videos. We don't waste our time with those kind of games. I don't even know where that came from. Did you put that there, Baron Bunny? Did you trying to play games? I'm trying to be serious. Trying to make quality YouTube videos. But we're here to talk about Ghostwire Tokyo, so let's get into the video. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I am Ryofu, and you are watching the Gaming Harbinger. Before I get started, I want to preface the video. This review is based off the PlayStation 5 version. If you have a beefy PC, you can experience an even prettier version of the game. I have heard that this version does experience stutters occasionally, and it has something to do with Unreal Engine 4. Also to you Game Pass subscribers, I am going to place a bet that this game will hit Xbox sometime spring or summer of next year. But more importantly, just like Deathloop, I do believe this game will drop on Game Pass. But more importantly, just like Deathloop, I believe this game will drop on Game Pass after the 1-year PlayStation 5 exclusivity ends. Now let's get back to the review. Ghostwire is a Tango Gameworks property that released on March 25th, 2022. If you are not familiar with Tango, it is Shinjimikami's developer studio. I will just say this, the man directed and helped create the original Resident Evil. He was also the director of Resident Evil 4. The story of Ghostwire starts with a spirit trying to find a body to possess. To his dismay, he picks a person who is unconscious but not dead. Therefore, he doesn't have complete control over the body. The person possessed is Akito, and he is the protagonist of the story. When Akito comes to realize he somehow survived his vehicle accident, he also notices a peculiar fog sweeping over the streets. The fog eventually starts engulfing people and turning them into spirits. The only reason Akito is able to survive the fog is because he has been possessed by KK. Throughout the game, the relationship between Akito and KK becomes close, and they eventually help each other out and grow and understand each other's flaws. While this is happening, Akito becomes really concerned for his ill sister who is in the hospital. Of course, something happens in the story and his sister isn't where she is supposed to be, so he begins his journey to get her back, all the while trying to understand why are all these evil spirits flooding the city, as well as there's just random spirits floating around from people that are deceased. I want to stop here because I feel like I could tell you more about the story, but I think stopping here is wise. But I will say the story behind the game is actually solid. I especially love how the game ended. It truly feels like a story about healing and overcoming tragedies in your life. As far as combat, it presents Kujikiri hand gestures as a means to perform these psychic and supernatural abilities. It's like running around as a mage class that can take a few hits. Essentially, you're the avatar. So I would kind of describe this game as an action game with a horror backdrop. There are some really cinematic set pieces that help set up the game during certain points in the story, and I feel like it's executed very well. Some of these sequences are very creepy, but I was never scared playing this game. Just some parts are a tad creepy, like a headless schoolgirl trying to talk on her cell phone. Yeah, I'm being serious. You can't make this stuff up. Well, I mean, unless you're Shinjimikami, you can make this stuff up, but the average person can't. Or faceless Japanese salarymen power walking towards you. Not only is a salaryman terrifying, but he has to have no face? Why? Why are you doing this to us? and they just had to add Hachishaku-sama. Now, if none of you have heard of Hachishaku-sama, it's kind of like a Japanese urban legend. Just think of Slender Man, but it's a female version of that. But there's a little more to it than that. If you're not familiar with it, I think you should Google the story. I don't want to ruin it for you. It's kind of an interesting urban legend, to say the least. But when you come across this ghost in the game, she's fast, she's strong. It takes a lot to hurt her. She's a pain in the butt and terrifying. And so, yeah. And if I were to be completely honest, like, all of the female spirits, all of them are terrifying. I mean, the headless schoolgirls, they're kind of like the lower grade level, but let's just be honest, all of them are terrifying. I don't want anybody running at me with no head. That's not cool. Not to mention, the game throws Shinto imagery and Japanese folklore themes as another layer on top of the horror aesthetic. Not that this hasn't been done before, but we just don't get high budget games on this level doing unique and quirky things such as this. It all adds up to create an incredible atmosphere. And also, let's be honest, who doesn't like cats being a shop owner? As for performance, the game has more than a couple of options for gamers. 4K with ray tracing at 30 frames per second, 1080p at 60 frames per second, quality mode with uncapped frame rate, performance mode with uncapped frame rate, and then it's essentially the same options as the last two, but just include VSync to that. So in other words, we're talking about 6 graphic modes to choose from. Now I'm going to say something that might make gamers emotional, and I apologize. In this particular instance, I have to choose 4K at 30 frames per second over 1080p at 60. Not only do you lose a few shadows and reflections, but the colors and the images, they just look a little muddy in 1080p. If this was a last-gen version of the game, I would be okay with it. But the 30 frames per second feels stable for the most part, and I feel like the fidelity bump makes a difference in this game. It isn't the highest quality of a current-gen game, but at 1080p it looks like a last-gen game that runs smoothly. And I don't know. It's just like, that's not why I paid $500 for this. I'm just being honest. If any of you watched my Dying Light video, upon release, Dying Light 2 pretty much had you choosing 1080p at 60 or 4K at 30. They eventually came out with a balance mode that had 4K at 60, which looks really good. But in the beginning, I had to pick the high frame rate mode because the 4K seemed a little under 30 frames per second. Not only that, I think because you are moving at such a fast pace with lots of foliage, it did not look good in 4K. Anyways, Dying Light is a game that needs to be played at a high frame rate, and this game is totally different. So we have solid graphics, we have a good, strong, compelling story, we have Shinto imagery, it takes place in Tokyo. We have all these things that really create a haunting and visionary atmosphere. So you might be asking yourself, like, does this mean the game is amazing? Does this mean it's perfect? Well, you know, it's not perfect. I'm gonna be honest, it's not perfect. It has some flaws, and we'll discuss those right now. So let's start with the least offensive to the worst. The first one is that this game has an open world. The problem with that is that maybe it just wasn't necessary. Not every game has to be a Ubisoft game. It's okay to tell a story and it ends in 20 or 30 hours. Even 14 or 16 hours can be worth the asking price. That might encourage me to play your game multiple times. Now, I do want to say, I think it's good a Japanese dev is making a non-RPG game that has an open world. But I think specifically with this game, it could keep people from finishing it. This complaint kind of ties to my second point, which is the combat can be repetitive. It can become repetitive. I think with each element you need a secondary attack. I think that's what was needed here, or a more powerful move besides just holding the button down and charging. I think the Kujikiri looks really cool, but I can see if you use the same two elements over and over and over, it can feel repetitive even with just 5 hours into the game. And then you compound that with a huge map with hours and hours of side quests. I do want to add that there are other means of combat that are non-elemental, and they do shake things up a little bit. But you are mostly using the elemental attacks, so therefore the action can get repetitive real quick. The next thing is something you have heard others complain about, and that is the controls and overall feel of combat. It's a little delayed and floaty. It takes a minute to get used to. Some critics have described this game as something that could have came out a generation ago. To be honest with you, I don't take offense to this statement because I totally see what they're saying. Like in terms of the pacing and how the set pieces happen at certain points in the story, it totally makes sense, which is what kind of throws you off because you get that flow and actually it feels good to me. But then you have the open world aspect thrown to you, and I mean, eventually there is a rhythm and a flow to that as well, but you can tell it's almost like, it feels like someone that's made games a long time, and then all of a sudden someone comes up to him and is like, hey, all the kids are doing this these days, so you need to make your game like this. And he's like, oh, okay, I guess I will make it open world if you say so. If I were to be completely honest with you, I would have been okay if this would have been a more linear experience. But my takeaway with it being open world is this. Once I got into this game, I didn't want to stop playing it. And there's so many things I like about it more than dislike. So then it was getting to a point where I'm like, oh, I'm glad there's so much stuff for me to do here. It can feel a little repetitive, but I like it and I don't want to leave this world. I don't want to leave this universe. So in that regard, I kind of appreciated that there was so much content for me to dig into. I think this game is a slightly tricky recommend. People that love shinjimikami games, or they like horror, or they like games that take place in Tokyo, or they like ancient Japanese lore, they are going to love this. I think for others not interested in these things, they are going to have a tough time getting behind the cultural nuances as well as the hit and miss combat. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Please leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let me know if you planned on playing Ghostwire Tokyo. Like I said, I really enjoyed this game. I really got into it, and just anytime I had a little extra time, even if it was just for like an hour, I love jumping into this world, finishing a few quests here and there. I really appreciate the Tokyo aesthetic as well as all the Shinto artifacts that are placed throughout the game. It just has a different vibe, and I find it very refreshing, especially if you play a lot of Western games. I just find something like this very refreshing. By the way, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. As always, I appreciate you watching the video to the very end, and I will see you next time. I'm sorry.